can you remind me? If you'll be so kind. Staring out into space, asking God to hear my case. Trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last? The purple angel, the purple angel, the purple angel, you're next to me.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I am your host and founder of Alzheimer Speaks, Lori La Bey, and today we're going to have a great show talking about inflammation and Alzheimer's disease and what the two have to do with one another. For those of you that are new to our show, Alzheimer Speaks, first of all, wants to welcome you here. We are a place where we try to shift dementia care around the world from crisis to comfort by connecting people to products, tools, and services, giving them tips to help you live graciously alongside dementia. I know what it's like. My own mother lived with dementia for 30 years, and I get the isolation, the guilt, the frustration, and the exhaustion. But there's a flip side to that coin that can really lead you on a path of joy and purpose and passion and a deeper connection than you can ever imagine there being. So I hope you listen to the full show and pass it along, because that's one of the things our audience does so well is pass this information along so others can have it. So many people are in your own spheres of influence that haven't come out and even said they're dealing with this with a loved one or someone in their own family or maybe, just maybe even themselves. So it's really important to get this information out to people so that they feel comfortable and confident forging ahead and to be able to still live a purpose-filled life and feel connected to friends and family. If you are a business, you might be interested in Alzheimer Speaks, because we are also known as not only an advocacy-based company, but one that offers multiple platforms that we share to help expand your branding. So we can assist companies in leveraging our content to increase people's knowledge of their existence of, again, service products and tools. And so it's just kind of a neat way to collaborate together. Now, before I introduce our guest today, I am going to mention just a couple of shout-outs. One is the Memory Cafe directory. If you're not familiar with Memory Cafes, they are a gathering of people with dementia along with their care partners, where they really build this sense of community. They have a lot of fun, and they talk about real-life issues, not just dementia-related, but the visits with the grandkids and family members, if they got a flat tire, the holiday seasons, vacations, all of that kind of stuff. And so it really takes a holistic and a whole person approach. And again, they're just a fabulous place to find a like-minded peer group that understands what you're going through and is willing to support you. You can go to memorycafedirectory.com for more information. And then a lot of you are probably looking for holiday ideas. And one great gift is always a book in this season. And so you might want to check out a book that, you know, is critically important to helping families deal with a dementia diagnosis. It's written by Keith Gallus, who has spent more than 20 years helping families work through all those questions that keep popping up on this dementia journey. The book itself is called Parental Dementia, a guide through all the difficult questions. And it even has some great worksheets in the back that can help you kind of collect your thoughts and figure out what your needs are and get you a little organized and feeling a little bit more confident about moving forward. You can purchase the book by going to parentaldementia.com. That's parentaldementia.com. And if you put in the code Lori, Lori, you'll save $5.99. So, hey, you can't beat that deal. Last, I just want to give a shout-out to Stall Catchers. Stall Catchers is a game. It's a video game that anybody can play. They have ages 6 to 96 playing this game. And it actually analyzes real-life Alzheimer's data. And so by playing this game, which is free, we can really move research forward in this area. So check out stallcatchers.com. You might want to even get some, fun competitions going. Some libraries are doing competitions, some schools, some families, and then actually some countries as well. So, again, a great kind of fun thing to do if you're dealing with dementia, if you want to advocate for it, is to check out Stall Catchers. And then again, for you listening, I cannot thank you enough. It's loyal supporters like our listeners who have liked, clicked, and shared our content on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all the other social media platforms out there. And we all know that by working together and raising each other's voice, we can build a sense of community, collaboration, and comfort for those needing information and resources regarding dementia and caregiving. And I firmly believe that together is the only way we are going to be able to battle dementia. So please join us. We would love to have you be part of our community. And if you have any questions during today's show, you can call in to 323-870-4602. That's 323-870-4602. So let me introduce our first guest here today. I have Dr. Tesi with us, and she is an expert in the field of neuroinflammation. She's the director of the Center for Translational Research in Neurodegenerative Disease at the University of Florida in Gainesville, and she is also a consultant for INmune Bio in support of the company's Alzheimer's disease program. So welcome, Dr. Tesi. How are you doing?
Wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm excited that you're with us. I'm hoping that we have Dr. Tesi on the line. Looks like you might be calling in from another number, but I'm hoping it's him. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce him, and we will check and move forward here shortly. So Dr. RJ Tesi is the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Medical Officer of INmune Bio, Inc. And before that, he worked as an executive in other, biopharma companies. He is also a physician since 1982, and he's also a former surgeon. So, Dr. Tesi, are you on the line with us?
I am. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, wonderful. I'm sorry we're having a little technical difficulty here, so I'm not quite sure why, but I'm going out of a hotel because I had an emergency here, so I'm supporting a friend who's not doing so well in the hospital. So thank you both for regrouping and making this show possible. Dr. Tesi, I want to start with you. And I always like to ask each of our guests if they have been personally touched by dementia within their own family or circle of friends.
So, yes, I have, both directly and indirectly. I mean, I have my best friend's mother developed Alzheimer's disease. And this was someone who was a vibrant woman who, over about a 10-year period went from being, completely independent and driving and hosting bridge parties to someone who really became really dependent on a caregiver. She was never needed to be institutionalized because of the resources the families had before she died, but she had quite severe disease that developed relatively, quickly in the scheme of things, starting when she was about 76, and she died about 10 years later.
Okay, great. And Dr. Tesi, how about you? Have you been personally touched in your circle of friends or with family?
Yes, I've had several friends and colleagues that have had parents with Alzheimer's or any other related dementias, and it's really heartbreaking. It's good to see that many of them are still out and about and are able to travel, but with the passing of the years, several of them have had to go in a home.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for sharing that. Now, I'm going to go back to Dr. Tesi, and if you can explain to us first why you feel inflammation is the right approach to end, this devastating disease that so many families are dealing with, and also what inspired you to pursue this path?
So I'm actually going to let Professor Tansey answer the inflammation question, because quite honestly, everything I know about the role of inflammation and Alzheimer's disease and dementia, I've really learned from here. But let me answer the second question of what has inspired me, and I'll be simple, and I hope this doesn't sound wrong. Is what really interests me in medicine are the unsolved problems. I am not someone that gets intrigued by making a better mousetrap. In other words, if there's a solution to a problem, to a medical problem, I'm quite confident that, patients and their physicians will gradually improve those solutions to a problem, let's call it, whether it's high blood pressure or, heart disease. What I get really driven to do is solve the problems that have no solution. And, Alzheimer's disease is really the disease of our time. I mean, baby boomers like myself, there's going to be a lot of us who are already entering the age of risk for Alzheimer's and dementia, and I'm fast approaching that, and doggone it, I want a solution for that problem before it affects me or others around me. So that's what really gets me up in the morning, is seeing a problem that's not been solved and saying, okay, it's up to you to do it. And I'll let Malú mention why inflammation is so important, because it's not only important in Alzheimer's disease, but also many other diseases of aging. Malú?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to address that. So inflammation is something that is both good and bad. When your body is injured in different ways, your immune system mounts an inflammatory response to aid in the resolution of that injury or to destroy a pathogen that has come into your body. But that kind of inflammation tends to be rather short-lived and pretty well regulated. Now, as you age, one of the things that happens is that there's an increase in inflammation in all your body tissues, in good part because the immune cells in your body, the immune cells that are in charge of keeping you healthy and fight infection, they are also aging. And one of the things that happens is that they end up staying activated instead of going, quiescent again. And so as you're aging, one of the things that happens is that inflammation becomes chronic and doesn't resolve. And we now know that inflammation, when it becomes chronic, is one of the drivers of cancer, heart disease, and now we are appreciating the fact that it also drives some of these neurological diseases, in particular Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, and these age-related dementias. And the reason it does that is because it erodes the tissues, it activates cell death pathways in cells, and it, in essence, contributes to an immunosuppressed state as you're getting older. And so you're less able to keep the house tidy, if you will, and a lot of toxic aggregates and toxic proteins build up in your brain, and they're unable to be cleared.
Okay, wonderful. That's very helpful. We've heard so much about the amyloid plaques and so many researchers going down that road. And Dr. Tesi, I wanted to ask you, what your thought is in terms of a strategy for tackling amyloid plaques. Is that really a rational approach? We've heard so many failures out there with a lot of the research out there, or is this just something that's required? And if so, who the heck's in charge of saying that's the path that people have to go down for their research projects?
Well, that's a very interesting question. And so first of all, there's no question that the pursuit of therapies targeting amyloid was based on, scientific intuition. And the experiments that were done suggested it was something that might work. The problem came about, though, when people became so convinced that it was amyloid was the solution and the only solution that they did a trial and it failed, and then they thought about it and they did another trial and it failed, and then they thought about it and did another trial and it failed. And it reminds me of the famous quote by Albert Einstein, which I will paraphrase, that says, something like, crazy or futility is doing the same experiment over and over again and expecting a different outcome. So my point is that despite really solid thinking by very good people, when amyloid began to stop showing promise, instead of pivoting and going in other directions, and one of those directions is neuroinflammation, obviously that's our strong bias, people just kept persisting. So I think what happened is they were so committed to the amyloid story that they just, dug in their heels and gritted their teeth, and I think we lost time. And we lost time, and now that it's not to say that there won't be a role for anti-amyloid therapies. There's absolutely going to be a role, but it is not the only solution. And now, academic scientists like Malú and companies like INmune Bio are really exploring a lot of other very innovative approaches, looking at different causes of Alzheimer's disease. And what you're going to see over the next 10 years is this explosion of innovation in the field of Alzheimer's disease, and it will make a difference. Because of this innovation, you're going to see a lot of different approaches tested. Patients will benefit, and our personal bias, or at least my personal bias, is that targeting inflammation is a very sound strategy. But I hope I don't fall into the same trap that all those amyloid acolytes did. That if it doesn't work, I'll roll up my sleeves and go in a different direction. I'm just not going to. I hope I just don't beat my head against the wall insisting that it's inflammation, it's inflammation, it's inflammation.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful, because it does seem like some are really, dug in pretty deep, and I know this is expensive work to do, and so it's hard to, kind of flush the toilet on it and go, okay, this isn't working, and trying to figure out what's the next path out there, because I know you researchers put your heart and soul into these projects, and so I can see how that can happen, probably personally with researchers and companies, as a whole, backing these projects. Do you expect your drug to be one of many drugs that will really be used for different populations? And if so, can you kind of explain that a little bit to us?
So thank you. The answer is I believe that almost every disease in medicine, particularly complex diseases like Alzheimer's diseases, there's going to be more than one solution, and frequently the solution or the best treatment will be combination therapy. Let's look at something as simple as heart disease. How do we treat heart disease? We make sure that people take one pill to make sure their cholesterol is low. They take another pill to make sure their blood pressure is under control, and they take another thing that can make sure their glucose or their sugar is under control. So, here you have three elements, blood pressure, glucose, and lipids, that are all important elements of contributing to the risk of cardiovascular disease. I think Alzheimer's is going to be the same. It's a multimodal, complex disease, and every patient's going to be a little bit different, and you need to be able to target certain elements. And inflammation, and Malú is more qualified than I am to talk about this, but neuroinflammation is kind of like, I guess it's kind of like, the elevated cholesterol of Alzheimer's disease. It's going to cut across a lot of the different pathologies. So you're going to end up with patients on more than one strategy, more than one treatment, and that is the way that they will be able to really prevent from getting on that slippery slope of dementia that, robs their soul and puts all that pressure on their family. So I think the future is bright. The solutions won't be simple, but I'm confident we'll get there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I kind of view, Alzheimer's and the various types of dementia almost like a cancer in and of itself, that there's different causes for different types, and the further that, we go down this path, the more we're going to find out. We're seeing that just in terms of, all of a sudden now there's mild cognitive impairment, and people are hearing more about Lewy body and frontal temporal lobe and vascular dementia, and I find it fascinating in terms of the variables that are out there and the amount of unknowns in terms of cause and effect with this whole thing. So I think it's it's definitely not going away. I also see where families talk a lot where they say science says this isn't hereditary, but I can't tell you how many families I talk to that say this runs deep in our family, and we have a hard time believing that there's not something more to this. And I just say to them, and maybe I'm wrong at this, that we have such little research on that basis that we don't really know, and that's why it's important for families and people with dementia to both get involved with these trials so that we can gather this information and this history. What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Tesi? I'm going to throw that one to you. Oops, let me see. I didn't get you. There, you are off mute now, so we should be able to hear you.
No problem. Yes,
there
can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The chronic inflammation that you have in cases that are driven by cancer and cancerous cells are the hallmark is chronic inflammation. And what happens is that the immune system becomes dysfunctional. Now, what we think might be happening in Alzheimer's disease based on genome-wide association studies, and genome-wide association studies, it sounds like a fancy term, but it's basically genetic studies that try to identify common genetic variants in a population that is predisposed to something. For instance, if you look at populations with Alzheimer's disease and you look at the common genetic variants that they share in common, you will find that over 60% of those are only related to immune cells or immune system. And that should tell us that one of the things that might be happening in Alzheimer's dementia is not just about the neurons that die. It's also about the support cells, like the immune cells and the glial cells that are there to keep the neurons healthy. And so if they become dysfunctional through genetic variants expressed in these cells, then they're not able to do their housekeeping job that they should do to keep the brain healthy. And this doesn't really show up when you're young, but it shows up later as you're aging. And it sometimes shows up sooner in people that have other environmental factors in their lives. It could be things like chronic systemic diseases like diabetes or arthritis or anything else that also fuels inflammation. And so the idea is that it's like cancer. It's basically a multifactorial, multi-hit dance card that you accumulate through life. And depending on your genetics and depending on your lifestyle and your environment, then you're either at increased risk or decreased risk for these age-related diseases. And so you're absolutely right that it is a lot like cancer, and we really have come a long way in cancer in trying to understand how to leverage the immune system function to fight cancer. So some of the Descartes therapies that are even now advertised on TV are doing exactly that. They're engineering T cells in your body, which are part of your adaptive immune system, and giving them an address so that they can home to the site of a tumor and kill very specific tumor cells, rather than having you undergo an entire battery of toxic chemotherapy that's going to affect other tissues and all your cells, not just the tumor cells. So by learning more about the immune system, genetics, and the exposures that fuel inflammation and contribute to increased risk, I'm pretty confident that we will be able to do something similar to what people in the cancer field have done, and that's identify the inflammation and immune pathways that are responsible for increasing risk and fueling disease progression.
Wonderful. Dr. Tesi, anything that you want to add on?
Yeah, I think and to extend a little bit what Malú says, that, controlling inflammation, do what you can today. And what I like to say with a smile on my face was, my mother was right? What did she say when I was growing up? She said, get your sleep, eat well, exercise every day, don't smoke, and, watch your weight. And in fact, if you do those things, now it may not prevent you from getting Alzheimer's, but it's certainly going to decrease the inflammatory burden you're putting on yourself, and it's gonna give you a chance to maybe prevent the development or slow the development of Alzheimer's or other chronic diseases of inflammation and aging. So, Mom, thanks for the advice.
Well, I find it so interesting. I'm 60 now, and all of the immune disorders that are out there that, I don't remember hearing about when I was younger, or even, I've got grandchildren now that, are allergic to so many different things, and it just seems like there's a lot more going on, and I hear the question over and over of, what's the cause of this? And I'm like, well, that's the $1 billion question, what everybody's working so hard to figure out there with all of this. I wanted to ask in terms of, and I'm going to throw this back to Dr. Tesi, because you've been researching this field for really a long time, and inflammation, is involved in Alzheimer's disease. And what have you seen so far in terms of results and people's thoughts, even regarding this philosophy and this path? Have you found people open and embracing it, or poo-pooing it?
There's a little bit of both. I would say. It's difficult to put forth controversial ideas after you have so many years of an established hypothesis that people think is the only thing that could be causing disease. And I think Dr. Tesi is right. We focused on the neurons because the neurons were the ones that had the senile plaques and the amyloid plaques and the tau tangles. But just because they are involved in the disease doesn't mean that other cells that perhaps are not accumulating these substances are evidence, right? And so what we think is important is to look with an open mind at the entire biology of the disease and recognize that neurons don't ever survive alone and they don't ever die alone. So most of the time, you're either inducing toxic injury on them or they're being neglected. And if you put all your eggs in the basket of saying there must be something intrinsically wrong with the neurons, and that's your whole story, if you think of it as a neuronal disease, then those are the therapies that you're going to develop. And as we have found out more about the disease, as the genome-wide association studies have clearly implicated immune function in the risk for the disease, then we are now able to form different theories that are testable about the role of other cells in the demise of these neurons. And inflammation is one of them. The original idea was that inflammation was there at autopsy because neurons had died and the immune cells were there to clean up the debris. Now we know by imaging people while they're alive and by using biomarkers that are able to tell us when their immune system is overactivated, we can now tell that the inflammation and the immune dysfunction in some of these patients, and some patients more than others, starts much earlier than even very robust cognitive symptoms. So we do think that the way you develop therapies is influenced by how you think of the disease. And in the last 10 years, I think we've developed a new version of what we think is happening. And it may be that these toxic aggregates of proteins or plaques are accumulating in the neurons because the other cells that are supposed to be supporting them are not doing their job properly as you age and perhaps in response to some other chronic systemic diseases.
Okay, great. I know, my mom lived with Alzheimer's and dementia for 30 years. And so we as a family and she wanted to have her brain autopsy. And I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Bill Fry here in Minnesota, but I sat down with him to kind of go over the results. And, he was just amazed at how small her brain had gotten, the atrophy. And then yet, in the next sentence he said, but that's exactly what you should expect when someone has had, symptoms for 30 years. But, we just haven't seen that many people live with it that long. I don't think it was recognized by either the party themselves or the physicians. And I see that changing big time out there now, where people are still functioning well, maybe not well enough to be able to work, but are still participating and being great advocates and have been living with the disease for 15 years. So, the face is changing and how I think people are becoming more open at looking at this at a much broader base. And I think that's absolutely critical. Now, you recently wrote an article about obesity and, that can be an important factor in the initiation of Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative disorders. Can you kind of explain to us a little bit about what the correlation might be between environmental conditions like obesity and the neurodegenerative diseases that we're seeing popping up?
Sure. So there's a lot of possibilities on how you can link obesity to risk for Alzheimer's, and they mostly revolve, again, around the role of chronic inflammation. One of the things that happens during obesity and metabolic syndrome, which is the pre-diabetic condition, is that all your peripheral tissues become very inflamed, and you have high circulating levels of proteins called cytokines, like tumor necrosis factor, like interleukin-6. And these factors, inflammatory factors, have a way to increase the permeability of not just the lining of the gut, but the blood-brain barrier. And both of these barriers in the gut and in the brain are trying to keep out substances out of the bloodstream, in the case of your gut, that may not be in the best interest of, the rest of your body. So they tend to wall it off in the lumen of the gut. And when the gut becomes inflamed, and that happens many times when you have an obese state or you consume high-fat, high-fructose diets, then the tight junctions that hold together the cells in the lining of the gut become very loose, and so you get what we call leaky gut syndrome. And when you get leaky gut syndrome, you have toxins from bacteria, from food substances, and things that should stay out of the bloodstream, and they enter the bloodstream because of the leakiness of the gut. And that tends to increase the likelihood of toxicity for the neurons in the brain, since the bloodstream is connected, right, and irrigating the brain. It also raises the permeability of the blood-brain barrier. So the brain only lets in certain types of cells into the brain from the blood, and that entry of those cells in the blood is very regulated. But when you have inflammation as a result of obesity or diabetes or other chronic systemic conditions, that barrier in the brain that keeps substances out or cells out also becomes leaky. And so we think that obesogenic states have the effect of disrupting the gut lining, the gut microbiota that is there to keep you absorbing nutrients and to keep things out that shouldn't be in the bloodstream. And that leakiness, both in the gut and in the brain, sets up a permissive environment for toxins and other things to enter the brain becomes inflamed, and the immune cells that are supposed to be keeping the house tidy become dysfunctional, and they can't keep up. And so that's what we think is one connection. The other connection may be through hypertension. So there's a few studies that suggest that midlife hypertension, when it's untreated, may also be a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. Now, those studies have only been done in Caucasians, so they need to be replicated in other ethnicities, but it is possible that the hypertensive state may also be associated with increased risk, and some of it may be through inflammation.
Okay, great. So do you believe, and we're hearing so much more about the whole, leaky gut and the importance of us really looking deeper at what we do and how we do it and what we take into the body, and the sleep has now become important where and we live in such a fast-paced society. Many people are lacking in a lot of these areas because there's so many pressures. What do you feel can be done to really prevent Alzheimer's disease? And are there some current therapies, being developed to treat these symptoms rather than the root of the disease itself?
Yeah, I think you're thinking about it exactly the right way. These diseases are going to be far easier to prevent than to cure, because once you lose neurons and your brain atrophies, the neurons and the connections that they form are not coming back. And so we would like to think that by understanding the gene-environment interaction, trying to target the innate immune dysfunction or any inflammation that may be happening maybe in your 30s or 40s may give us a window of opportunity to decrease the risk that comes with your genetics and also encourage people to modify their lifestyle with a good diet, exercise, sleep, so that you can keep your body in a healthier, younger state and perhaps prevent or at least delay the onset of some of these diseases. I think I envision that the Alzheimer's Association studies that are underway now in the U.S. And other parts of the world are aimed at exactly that, understanding how lifestyle changes through diet and exercise may be able to slow down the conversion from MCI to Alzheimer's or just reduce the risk that people that have family histories may stay cognitively intact rather than progress through a mild cognitive impairment. And I think if those studies are successful, they're called finger, pointer, and arrow, and they're going on in the U.S., in Australia, and other parts of the world. If those studies suggest that we can intervene and reduce risk, then I think it will lead to a public health policy much like we had for reducing smoking and for exercising for cardiovascular health.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I want to ask Dr. Tesi if you have anything you want to add to Dr. Tansey's comments there regarding that. And then I've got a few questions for you.
Yeah, so I just want to highlight one of the points she made was that, you know, the pathology starts many, many, many years before you become symptomatic. I mean, patients who develop Alzheimer's have actually been have been kind of storing up their problem for a decade or more. So, you know, as she said, ideally we want to intervene before you start that slippery decline down that slippery slope. And that will require treating people when they're quite healthy. And by treating, I mean it may be a pharmacological intervention or it might be a lifestyle intervention. But whatever it takes, whatever works, I'm sure people will do it.
Yeah, one of the things I really liked about the finger study, and because I had interviewed the head researcher on that as well, and what I heard from people is that they loved given specific areas that they could really make some changes, and it really gave people a lot of hope versus just waiting for a pill to pop out the door to fix it, because there's been this whole big thing about cure versus care. And, you know, trying to have this balance of people wanting to prevent it now or who are living with it and trying to at least maintain or slow down the process. And so I think it's really an important phase that you're looking at. Now, you went to a recent conference on Alzheimer's disease regarding clinical trials, and that just took place, you know, a few weeks ago. What is your view after going there on some of the recent news regarding, you know, some of those studies out there?
So this is RJ Tesi. I'll respond. You know, I think it's great stuff. I mean, it's going to take a lot of innovation and work, and, you know, there's going to be successful studies and failed studies, and, you know, like any journey that begins with the first step, you can't stand still and get where we're going. We have to, you know, you have to take the chance. The studies have to be done, and we have to pay attention. Most importantly, we have to pay attention to the results. So, you know, I think the more that is done, the better. And if I can go back to that analogy in cancer, you know, people in the Alzheimer's space and neurology drug development in general look with envy on the number of drugs that have been approved in the cancer indications. And, that's because, they've been really diligent and working hard. They've thrown a lot of stuff at the wall. Some of it sticks and some of it doesn't stick. But it's, in some ways it's good science. In some ways it's numbers game. In some ways it's a little bit of luck. But the bottom line is, now that we are allowed to think beyond amyloid, which I think has been a huge watershed event, I am confident that the amount of innovation from all these very smart people in the field is going to result in therapies that make a difference at the bedside. Hello?
Oh, sorry about that. Not sure what happened there. I was talking away, but you couldn't hear me. So can you hear me now?
Yes, we
can. Hear
can.
me now? Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Technology at its finest. We can't always control it. My question to you is, what do you think about the possible combination, therapy of tackling both the neuroinflammation and amyloid plaques? Is that, possibly a final solution?
Malú, why don't you tackle that one?
Okay, let me get her unmuted here. So there you go.
Yeah, is it a final solution to can you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Are you asking, is it a final solution to tackle the amyloid and the inflammation? Is that what you're asking?
Yep. Do you think that that's a possibility?
Yeah. Well, I would say that assumes that most Alzheimer's disease is homogeneous, and in fact, we know that it isn't, and there's different kinds of symptoms and different kinds of pathologies once we have a chance to examine the brain. So I would say that there's not going to be one or two magic bullets. I think it's going to be much like cancer, where you're going to have to understand what the cause of the disease might be and what is fueling the progression of disease. So in cases where we don't really understand what the cause is, or it's multigenic, polygenic risks, inflammation may be one common mechanism. And if we can tackle the inflammation, we may be able to delay or reduce risk for a good percentage of the population. But it's not going to be, necessarily something that happens very late in life. I think the inflammation starts very early, starts in your 30s and 40s. And so we're going to have to figure out a way to get very safe drugs to market if we're going to tackle the inflammation. And this has to be drugs that are not immunosuppressive. These have to be drugs that are not going to compromise your ability to fight infection. And I think if we can do that, then there's a chance that we can certainly advocate for good lifestyle interventions, as well as, maybe targeting the pathways that we know are contributing to chronic inflammation.
Okay. I want to throw another question out to you, Dr. Tesi, and then I'll have RJ respond as well. We're starting to hear about children getting diagnosed with different forms of neurocognitive diseases. What's, because I think most people think that this is just an adult and an older adult type disease. What are your thoughts, about, we're hearing that children are getting it now?
Are you referring to Down syndrome?
No.
Amyloid plaque? Or what?
There are actually children getting diagnosed with dementia around the world. Not a lot.
Okay.
And so,
yeah,
but we don't talk about that. And again, the focus, we're kind of pulling it out from the, people very old to now people are starting to accept the fact that people in their 50s and 60s and even 40s are getting diagnosed, and yet there are ones even younger than that, being diagnosed with dementia.
So the common dementias that make up the large pool, I would say, 2/3 to 3/4 is Alzheimer's disease. The next big one is Lewy body dementia, followed by vascular dementia and Parkinson's dementia, and then frontotemporal dementia, which is early onset dementia, and then alcoholic dementia. Now, there are very rare cases where there are genes that, when they're mutated, can give rise to syndromes and neurological symptoms in very young individuals, but they're not the bulk of the dementias. Some of them may be combinations of, psychiatric. They tend to be neurodevelopmental instead of age-related, and so you end up having there's a couple of diseases that are similar to lysosomal storage diseases like Gaucher's. There's one called NCL for the neurons build up this lipofuscin substance because their lysosomes are not working. And when that happens, the individuals that are like in their teens do develop, early onset dementia. But they're rare cases. They're not the big, common ones that you see. So
exactly.
Every conference, I think there's lots of diseases that we may not even know about in remote parts of the world, since some of the lifestyle of people in remote areas can be very different. And that needs to be researched. It needs to be explored because lifestyle and geographic, location and ethnicity can make a difference in terms of the rate of progression of these diseases.
Yeah, and I brought that up not to scare people, but to just show this is so much bigger than what we even know. To me, we know very, very little in comparison to other diseases out there, and we have to be open-minded, I think, to be able to find a cure or find something that will help prevent or maintain, because it is so varied. Dr. Tesi, anything that you wanted to add?
No, I think this has been a wonderful discussion. I think the you highlight the fact that 1, the need is still great, 2, that we're making progress, and 3, that it's going to take some hard work, but the future is bright.
Yep. And people can go to your website, INmuneBio.com, or they can follow you on Twitter as well. That's INmuneBio, and the links are there on our show page and also the blog. And we've also listed some videos that you can check out where both our doctors are talking about some various things that I think you'll find really, really interesting. So I want to thank you both so much for your time. And Dr. Tesi, anything that we forgot to cover? We've got a few more minutes if need be.
No, I think I would encourage your listeners to, take ownership of information that's out there. Visit the Alzheimer's Association webpage, the Lewy Body Dementia webpage, the Michael J. Fox Foundation webpage. There's a lot of resources out there, as well as the Parkinson's Foundation webpage. There's a lot of resources for people wanting to know more about the disease, and also very importantly for the caregivers, because they're under a lot of stress and it takes a toll on them. And there's resources out there, including support groups and other things that is very important. And lastly, I think we're going to find cures for these diseases and prevention probably in my lifetime, I would like to think. But it's important that we continue doing clinical trials. Even the failures teach us a lot. And so I would encourage your listeners to reach out and find out if they can become part of a clinical trial. There are lots of opportunities. Some are not invasive at all. They are just questionnaires. Some require a little bit of blood. But it's going to take a village of investigators, patients, caregivers, and the communities to really circle the wagon and beat these diseases.
I so agree. And we can't expect things to change if we're not willing to change ourselves. We're going to keep getting what we've always gotten. And so I agree. This disease is forcing us, if we want to or not, but to really bring unity through community and working together and sharing the knowledge that we hear. And so often I think people who are dealing with the dementia think, well, somebody just got diagnosed, we don't know anything, but you always know more than somebody else, and you always know less than someone who you can learn from. And I really think that that's something very important that we can't forget. There's always somebody who we can help with our voice or kind of give them a lift up. And sometimes it's not answering the question, it's just being willing to listen and let that person know that they're not alone in their journey. But there are many, many resources out there, so many on Facebook, social media groups where people can talk to people like themselves on this journey along with professionals, and so would really encourage you to do so. Again, I would love for you to like, click, and share this show with your spheres of influence. And again, don't forget to check out the website, INmuneBio.com. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your time that you took with us to give us some great insights regarding immune therapy and all you are doing and looking at. And we can hear the passion in your voice, and to me that's always exciting because I really think passion is what pushes things forward and makes us curious to look for new answers. And I think, I believe, Dr. Tesi, you were the one that said, hey, we, even when we fail, we learn, so this isn't all for naught. It all pushes us forward. If you are looking for additional resources, please check out AlzheimersSpeaks.com. We've got information not only on the radio show, and all of the shows are available 24/7 once they go live. But we do some video interviews with people living with dementia. Well, we just did one on holidays and tackling trigger tips and how to have the best of the best for your holiday season and look at things a little different. There's information about memory cafes, becoming dementia friendly, and so much more. So have a blessed holiday season, everyone. And again, thank you for joining us. Bye now.
Hi, this is Suzanne Newman, host of the Answers for Elders podcast and radio show. We are the North Star that guides you through the complicated journey of senior care with trusted experts in money, law, living solutions, and more. So join us on this station, your favorite podcast channel, or just go to AnswersForElders.com. Meet the Wayshowers who will help your journey go a lot easier.